Before Hitler built his empire, he studied Mussolini, word for word, step by step. Italy was Hitler's blueprint. Fascism was the model. Hitler saw Mussolini as the future and tried to replicate him in Germany. But something went horribly wrong between the teacher and the disciple. In 1934, Mussolini was ready to go to war against Hitler, but only 6 years later, that same Mussolini was sending Italian soldiers to die for Hitler's dream. What happened in those 6 years? This is the story of how admiration became obsession, how rivalry became partnership, and how two broken men from failed countries convinced themselves they could rule the world together. It's 1922, the March on Rome. Mussolini walks into government with black shirts at his back and fear in his opponent's eyes. Italy becomes a dictatorship under the banner of fascism, one-party rule, state over individual, absolute loyalty. Hitler watches from Germany. At this point, he's leading a failing coup d'etat attempt. The Nazi party is small, disorganized, and seen as a joke by most of Germany. But Hitler sees Mussolini's rise and gets an idea. He reads Mussolini's speeches, he studies his methods, he imitates his strategy. Even the term Duce, which is Italian for leader, becomes the template for Hitler's title, Führer. In fact, Hitler later tells his associates that Mussolini was the first man in Europe who had the courage to defy democracy and establish a dictatorship. Hitler became chancellor in 1933 and wasted no time consolidating power. He dismantled democracy, outlawed opposition, and made himself dictator. Then he reached out to Mussolini, Europe's only fascist leader with real power. Hitler sent letters, praise, and signals of alliance. Mussolini barely responded. Their first in-person meeting took place on June 14, 1934 in Venice. Hitler arrived in a brown shirt and a fedora hat, outclassed by Mussolini in full uniform. He tried to steer the conversation toward Austria, pushing for Nazi inclusion in Austrian politics. Mussolini, however, shut him down, deeming Hitler a mad little clown and silly little monkey. Only weeks later, Austrian Nazis assassinated Austrian Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss in a coup d'etat attempt backed by Berlin. Mussolini held Hitler responsible. He responded decisively. He mobilized 4 Italian divisions and bombers to the Italy-Austria border, warning that any German move into Austria would mean war. Italy's action forced Hitler to disavow the plotters and back down. By the mid-1930s, Mussolini and Hitler weren't exactly friends, but they were moving towards something close to a partnership. In October 1935, Mussolini invaded Ethiopia with over 400,000 troops. He framed it as the revival of the Roman Empire. In reality, though, it was a brutal colonial war. Italian forces dropped poison gas from planes, executed prisoners, and wiped out entire villages. Ethiopia pleaded with the League of Nations. The world condemned Italy. Many sanctions followed, and Italy became an international outcast. However, one country did not criticize Mussolini: Germany. Hitler told Mussolini he had the right to civilize Africa. It was the first time that the roles were reversed. Germany was backing Italy and not the other way around. It worked. In May 1936, Italian troops took Addis Ababa. The conquest was complete. The world's reaction only hardened Mussolini's turn away from Western democracies. Then came Spain. In July 1936, Spain descended into civil war. A failed military coup turned into a full-blown conflict between the Republican government and the nationalist rebels. Both Hitler and Mussolini jumped in fast. Mussolini went all in. 70,000 Italian troops, tanks, artillery, warplanes. It was the largest foreign deployment Italy had attempted since World War I. Hitler sent the Condor Legion. Elite Luftwaffe units, tanks, and advisors. German planes bombed towns. Guernica, a civilian target, was flattened. It was a test run for Blitzkrieg. Before 1936, Mussolini's fascism had been rooted in nationalism, order, and empire, not race. But after the Ethiopian backlash and the alliance with Hitler deepened, Mussolini's ideology transformed. He began to embrace Nazi racial language. Aryan theories started appearing in official publications. Anti-Semitic rhetoric started to creep up into newspapers and party platforms. Although not fully codified yet, the direction was clear. By September 1937, the power balance had shifted in Hitler's favor. Germany was booming under accelerated rearmament. Italy, on the other hand, was stuck. Mussolini needed something this time, while Hitler had nothing to lose. Hitler invited Mussolini to Munich for a state visit. Crowds cheered, uniformed soldiers saluted as Mussolini rode in with Goebbels and Ribbentrop. It was propaganda theater, but it was meaningful. Hitler had orchestrated it to showcase Germany's uprising and Italian deference. The indoor meetings were more revealing, however. Hitler laid out Germany's plans for European dominance, his vision of a new order, and Italy's place in that new world. Mussolini, who was usually loud and dominating, was listening rather quietly. By early 1939, Hitler was preparing for a massive war. He needed Italy aligned, or at least neutral. That's when the Pact of Steel was born. On May 22, 1939, German Foreign Minister Ribbentrop and Italian Foreign Minister Ciano signed a full military and political alliance. Known officially as the Pact of Friendship and Alliance, it committed each nation to military support if the other went to war. But Italy had no intention of rushing into conflict. In a hidden agreement, Mussolini and Ciano negotiated a wartime delay, planning that Italy would not be combat ready until 1942-1943. Mussolini explicitly warned in August 1939, just days before the Second World War began, that Italy needed several more years before fighting alongside Germany. Hitler, however, did not care. On 1st September 1939, he invaded Poland. World War II had begun. Just 2 days later, Germany informed Italy that military support wasn't mandatory. Only political and economic backing was required, as Italy wasn't yet ready for combat. But once France fell in 1940, Mussolini jumped in. He declared war on France and Britain, not because Italy was prepared, but because he didn't want to miss out on the spoils. Hitler was not impressed, but he let it slide. Now they're officially on the same side, but coordination, that's a disaster. German and Italian forces rarely operate well together. In late 1940, Mussolini invaded British-controlled Egypt from Libya. The campaign collapsed almost immediately. Italian troops were undersupplied, poorly led, and outmaneuvered. British forces counterattacked and pushed deep into Libya. Hitler had to send General Erwin Rommel and the newly formed Afrika Korps. Rommel arrived in 1941 and quickly stabilized the front, but not without frustration. Then came Greece, another catastrophe for Mussolini. In October 1940, without consulting Hitler, Mussolini ordered an invasion of Greece. He thought it would be quick, but it was not. The Greek army held firm and pushed the Italians back until winter set in. Italian troops froze in the mountains with no progress and heavy casualties. Hitler was furious. The Balkans weren't part of his immediate plans, but now he had no choice. To clean up Mussolini's blunder, he launched Operation Marita in April 1941. German troops invaded Greece and Yugoslavia simultaneously. From that point on, Hitler stopped treating Mussolini as an equal. He began referring to him in private as unstable, impulsive, and a liability. It's 1943. The tide of war is turning. The Allies invade Sicily. Bombs fall on Rome. Mussolini is in trouble. His inner circle is panicking. Italy is collapsing from within. Then comes the betrayal. July 25, 1943, Mussolini is summoned to the royal palace. King Victor Emmanuel III dismisses him. The same night, Mussolini is arrested. Hitler did not see this coming, but he acts fast. German troops occupy northern Italy, and then comes one of the most dramatic rescues of the war, Operation Ike. A team of German commandos led by Otto Skorzeny lands on a mountain where Mussolini is being held. They extracted him using a glider aircraft. Mussolini is flown to meet Hitler, but he's defeated. Hitler installs him as the head of a puppet regime in northern Italy, known as the Italian Social Republic. Mussolini is now entirely under Hitler's thumb. As the war nears its end, the Italian resistance is growing stronger. Mussolini tries to escape to Switzerland in April 1945 dressed as a German soldier. He does not make it. He's caught by partisans, summarily executed. His body is strung up in Milan, beaten, spat on, shot again and again. Hitler gets the news in his bunker, and 2 days later, Hitler is dead too. 2 men, one ideology, and a world torn apart.